Welcome to Vivid Verses. If our words resonate with you, please subscribe, tap the like, and share your thoughts and your feelings in the comments. Now let's begin. I view the world through a lens of risk management. This isn't a philosophy I picked up from a self-help book. It's a survival mechanism honed by 15 years in private equity. In my line of work, you learn quickly that the numbers on a spreadsheet are rarely where the real risk lies. The real risk is in the human element, the variance, the unpredictability, the capacity for rationalization. You have assets, time, capital, sanity, reputation, and you have liabilities. Most men go bankrupt, spiritually or financially, because they misclassify a liability as an asset simply because they share a bed with it. They mistake sunk costs for investment potential. I made that fundamental error with Rachel. I classified her as a partner, a value add to the infrastructure I was building. I viewed her social aptitude as a hedge against my own solitary tendencies, a way to diversify my life portfolio. I was wrong. She was an unhedged position, and like any volatile position that moves aggressively against you, you don't hope for a rebound. You don't double down to lower your cost basis. You execute the stop loss. You liquidate. It began on a Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. I was deep in the data room for a mid-cap logistics acquisition, scanning for irregularities in a target company's P&L. The deal was worth $80 million. My focus was absolute. I was looking for exactly the kind of thing I was about to find in my own life: off-balance sheet liabilities. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. It wasn't a text. It was a push notification from the American Express app. Credit limit approached. Card ending in 4091. The alert itself wasn't the immediate problem. Algorithms flag false positives all the time: a duplicate charge, a travel flag. The problem was the specific instrument involved. My primary card ends in 88. My business expense line ends in 02. The 4091 was a legacy authorized user card I'd issued to Rachel 8 months prior. We had established a clear, verbal contract regarding that instrument. It was a redundancy measure. It was for life or death liquidity. If the transmission dropped out of her SUV on the highway, if she was stranded at O'Hare during a blizzard, or if an urgent medical copay required immediate clearance. I set the limit at $20,000, not as a spending target, but as a safety net large enough to cover a medical evacuation or a bail bond. It was a tool, like a fire extinguisher. You don't spray a fire extinguisher in the living room because you're bored. I logged into the portal immediately. I didn't feel anger yet. I felt the cold, prickly sensation of a data discrepancy. The current balance read $20,412.18. Available credit was 0. I downloaded the CSV transaction file because I needed raw data, not the glossy app interface. I pulled it into Excel and ran a quick sort by merchant category. I also pulled up my personal calendar on the second monitor to cross-reference dates. The fraud hypothesis, my initial hope, evaporated in seconds. Fraudsters operate in patterns of high-velocity extraction. They buy crypto, bulk gift cards, or electronics in foreign jurisdictions. They don't buy personalized services in the zip code where you live. I saw charges for the Sanctuary Spa totaling $850. I checked my calendar for that date. That was a Wednesday. Rachel had told me she was at her mother's helping with a garage sale. I saw Oma case room for $400 on a Tuesday night. I was in Chicago for the board meeting. She had texted me, "Good night, going to sleep early," at 9 p.m. The charge was authorized at 10:15 p.m. I saw repeated transactions at The Real, Fashion File, and Net a Porter. These weren't sudden, one-time hits. This was a sustained, 3-month campaign of consumption that had accelerated as she realized I wasn't auditing the secondary account monthly. She was structuring the theft. The earlier charges were small, 50 here, 100 there. Testing the perimeter. When no alarm sounded, she ramped up. The curve was exponential. The final charge, the one that tripped the limit, was processed 30 minutes ago. $2,800 for a Chanel flat bag lambskin. I sat there and stared at the cell on the spreadsheet. I didn't see a bag. I saw a breach of contract. I saw a partner who viewed my resources as a limitless aquifer to be drained. I closed my office door. This wasn't a marital spat anymore. This was an internal embezzlement investigation. I needed to know the full exposure before I initiated the confrontation. If she compromised this channel, she might have compromised others. I spent the next 3 hours performing a forensic audit of my entire life. I checked the joint checking. We keep a float of $5,000 there for mortgage and utilities. The balance was $124. I checked the emergency savings buffer. It was zero. I pulled my credit report from all 3 bureaus to ensure she hadn't opened new lines of credit in my name. Thankfully, the inquiries were clean. She hadn't committed identity theft. She had just pillaged the authorized access. I calculated the total damage, $15,000 on the card, plus the previous month's balance that I had auto-paid without scrutinizing, plus roughly $8,000 in drained liquid cash from the joint accounts. $23,000. That is a significant operational loss. That is a new roof. That is a maxed-out Roth IRA contribution for 3 years. It represents roughly 3 months of my labor post-tax. She had effectively enslaved me for 90 days without my knowledge. I went home at 6:30 p.m. I needed to control the environment. I didn't stop for food. I didn't listen to a podcast. I drove in silence, rehearsing the opening moves. When I walked in, the apartment smelled like expensive sandalwood candles. Another sunk cost, another match burned. Rachel was on the sofa, scrolling on her phone. She looked up and smiled. It was a practice smile, the kind used to smooth over social friction. "Hey, you're home early," she said. I didn't smile back. I placed my laptop bag on the dining table. I didn't loosen my tie. I needed the armor. "We need to conduct a review," I said. She paused. She knows that tone. It's the tone I use when a contractor tries to overbill me for materials. "A review? Of what?" "Liquidity," I said. "I received a notification from Amex today. Apparently, the emergency line is maxed out. I need you to walk me through the emergency that cost $20,000. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor, then at the window. This is a classic evasion tactic, breaking eye contact to formulate a narrative. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I was going to tell you. It's not a big deal. I had some things to handle. Things, household things, lifestyle things." She stood up, trying to regain the high ground by moving around. "You've been so checked out lately with the merger, Noah. I've been handling the emotional labor of this relationship. I needed to do some things for myself to keep my sanity." I watched her move to the kitchen. She was trying to normalize the situation by performing a domestic routine, getting water, opening the fridge. She was banking on my fatigue. She thought if she minimized it enough, I would just accept the loss to avoid the conflict. "Rachel," I said, "I have the statement. I have a CSV file. I see a $3,000 bag. I see spa treatments. I see dinners for 2 when I wasn't present. Who were you with?" She slammed the fridge door. The mask slipped. "My friends. God, am I not allowed to have friends? Am I supposed to sit here and wait for you to finish work at 9 p.m. every night like a dog?" "You are allowed to have friends," I said. "You're not allowed to finance your social life on a line of credit explicitly reserved for catastrophes. You committed to a specific protocol when I handed you that card. You broke it." She spun around, her face flushing. Here came the pivot. When caught on facts, The manipulator attacks the motive. You are so obsessed with money. It's disgusting, Noah. You make plenty. We aren't hurting. Why do you have to track every penny like some sort of a miser? I did this for us. Explain the mechanics of that, I said. What does a Chanel bag benefit us? Image, she shouted. You want me to go to your corporate mixers looking like a peasant? You want your partners to think you can't provide? I'm investing in your reputation. I needed to look the part. You should be thanking me for taking the initiative instead of acting like I robbed a bank. I walked over to the table and opened the laptop. I had the pivot table ready. I'm not acting like you robbed a bank. I'm stating that you misappropriated funds. And regarding my reputation, my partners respect liquidity and discipline. They do not respect debt-financed vanity. If I told them my partner maxed out a credit card on handbags to impress them, they wouldn't see status. They would see a liability. I turned the screen toward her. Look at the data. I don't want to see your stupid spreadsheets. You will look, I said. My voice was flat, devoid of rage, heavy with authority. This is the reality of your actions. You spent $2,800 on a bag. You spent $4,000 on wellness retreats. Meanwhile, the joint account is overdrawn. You didn't just spend credit. You liquidated our cash buffer. That is negligence. She started to cry. I've seen this reaction in boardroom terminations. It's a defense mechanism designed to trigger empathy and halt the aggressor's advance. It forces the other party to become a comforter, thereby ending the interrogation. I viewed it objectively. Her distress was real, but it was distress over consequences, not contrition over actions. You're being so cold, she sobbed. I was stressed. You don't understand the pressure. What pressure? I asked. We have no children. We have a housekeeper. You work 20 hours a week as a consultant. The pressure you are feeling is the friction between your desires and your capabilities. You want a lifestyle you cannot afford, so you stole it from me. It's not stealing. We're partners. Partnership implies shared risk and shared governance. This was unilateral extraction. You made a decision to alter our financial position without my consent. That is not partnership. That is parasitism. I'll pay it back, she snapped, wiping her eyes. If you're going to be such a jerk about it, I'll pay it back. I nodded. Let's model that out. You bring in roughly $2,500 a month post-tax. You have personal expenses, student loans, your lease on the Audi. That total $1,500. That leaves you $1,000 of discretionary income, assuming you stop eating out entirely. To service a $23,000 debt at 24% APR, you're looking at a payback period of 3 years. During that time, you are a net negative asset to this household. She stared at me. She hadn't done the math. She never does the math. She operates on vibes and manifestation. I operate on arithmetic. So what? She said. You have the money. Just pay it off and I'll owe you. No, I said. That validates the behavior. It tells you that if you dig a hole, I will fill it. That creates a moral hazard. I cannot build a future with a hole in the bottom of the boat. I pull my phone out. What are you doing? I am calling American Express. What? Panic edged into her voice. To file a fraud report. No, I don't. That's insane. It wasn't fraud. I had the card. You had the card under false pretenses, I said. But you have a choice. We can handle this internally, or we can handle it externally. I put the phone on the table, screen up. I dial the number. The automated voice began its menu sequence. I looked at her. Option A, I said. You acknowledge the debt in writing. You transfer your personal savings. I know you have about $5,000 in that separate account to me tonight. We sell the bags. We sell the shoes. We liquidate the luxury goods to cover the variance. And then we terminate the living arrangement. Terminate? You mean break up? I mean eviction, I said. She laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. You can't kick me out. I have rights. I've lived here for 2 years. You are an occupant at will. The lease is in my name. I pay the mortgage. I pay the HOA. You are a guest who has violated the house rules. I will serve you a 30-day notice to quit tomorrow morning. If you refuse to leave, I will file for formal eviction, and I will attach the judgment for the stolen funds to your credit report. You will have an eviction and a massive debt collection on your record. You will not be able to rent a parking space in this city, let alone an apartment. You would destroy me over money. You destroyed the trust, I said. The money is just the scorecard. I love you, she screamed. Doesn't that matter? Love is not a license to embezzle, I replied. If you loved me, you would respect my labor. You don't. You view me as a resource, and I'm closing the mine. The next hour was purely transactional. She realized I wasn't bluffing. She saw the lack of emotion in my face. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't throwing things. I was simply executing a protocol that frightened her more than rage would have. I made her log into her personal bank account. She transferred $4,200 to me. It was everything she had. Now the goods, I said. I can't sell the bag. I used it. The secondary market for Chanel is liquid, I corrected. Get the dust bags. Get the receipts. We are photographing them now. She cried the entire time she retrieved the items from the closet. I inspected them. A Celine tote, the Chanel, a pair of Louboutins that looked like they'd been worn on pavement. I estimated a 40% recovery on the retail price. It was a loss, but a mitigated one. I took photos of the items on the dining table. I listed them on the reseller platforms immediately. I didn't trust her to do it. I drafted the promissory note for the remaining balance. I made it simple. She acknowledges the debt. She agrees to a payment schedule. I printed it. Sign it, I said. She signed. Her hand was shaking. Now, I said, the living situation. You have 30 days. That is the statutory requirement. I will sleep in the guest room. We will not share meals. We will not share a social calendar. You are a tenant serving out a notice period. Do not ask me for money. Do not ask me for favors. The next 30 days were an exercise in psychological siege warfare. I approached the month not as a domestic tragedy, but as a containment operation. The primary objective was to protect the remaining assets and ensure her departure without property damage. I secured the physical perimeter first. I installed a keypad lock on my home office door. I moved my passport, birth certificate, and hard drives to a safety deposit box at the bank. I changed the Wi-Fi password and didn't give it to her. When she complained, I told her that utilities were part of the shared costs she had defaulted on. If she wanted internet, she could use her cellular data. The first week was defined by denial. Rachel operated under the delusion that this was a temporary flare-up, a power play that would de-escalate if she just waited it out. She tried to maintain the routine. She would buy groceries using cash, presumably, and cook dinner, leaving a plate for me. I didn't touch it. Eating her food would re-establish a social contract I had already voided. I ate out or cooked when she wasn't in the kitchen. She walked around the apartment in a silk robe, leaving the door to the master bedroom open when she showered. It was a crude attempt at leverage. She thought that access to her intimacy was an asset that outweighed the liability of her spending. She was trying to deploy a Trojan horse, get me back in bed, maybe even risk a pregnancy to cement the bond legally. I recognized the tactic immediately. The biological impulse was there, but the intellectual override was stronger. I didn't see a lover. I saw a bad investment trying to recapitalize. By the second week, the atmosphere shifted to external pressure. I received a call on a Thursday afternoon. It was her father, Jim. We had always been cordial, sharing scotch at Thanksgiving, but he was a man who led with emotion, not logic. "Noah," he said, "Rachel called me. She's in a state. She says you're kicking her out on the street." "I'm ending the relationship," I said. I've given her 30 days. That is standard notice. She made a mistake, son. People make mistakes. You don't blow up a life over a credit card bill. You guys are building something. We aren't building anything, I corrected. I was building. She was excavating. She stole $23,000, Jim. That's not a mistake. That's a felony if I chose to press it. She said it was for the household, for appearances. She lied to you, I said. She spent on luxury goods and spa days while I was working. If you want to underwrite her lifestyle, I can send you the Venmo request for the outstanding debt. Would you like to cover her balance? There was a long silence on the line. He wanted to defend his daughter, but he didn't want to pay the bill. I thought you were a better man than this, he muttered. I'm a solvent man, I said. I'll make sure she packs everything safely. I hung up. The attempt to outsource the guilt had failed. The third week moved into social sabotage. I came home to find 3 of her friends in the living room, drinking wine. They went silent when I entered. This was a territorial display. She was trying to make me uncomfortable in my own asset, surrounding herself with a tribunal of peers to judge me. Noah, one of them said, "Don't you think you're taking this a little far?" I stopped. I recognized this woman. She was in several of the photos Rachel had posted on Instagram, dinners that I had unknowingly paid for. You're Sarah, correct? I asked. Yes. You went to the Omakase room with Rachel on the 14th of last month. The bill was $400. What? I have the itemized receipt. Rachel paid for it using stolen funds. Since you're here, and you're concerned about fairness, would you like to reimburse me for your half of the meal? Venmo is fine. The room went dead silent. The social dynamic collapsed instantly. They weren't moral arbiters. They were accomplices to the consumption. That's what I thought, I said. Enjoy the wine. It's the last bottle in the house. I walked to my office and locked the door. They left 20 minutes later. They didn't come back. During this week, I also handled the asset recovery. I met a buyer from a luxury consignment group at a coffee shop. I brought the Chanel bag. The woman inspected it with white gloves, checking the serial number and the stitching. It's authentic, she said, but there's a small scuff on the hardware, and the market is softening on this color. What's the offer? $1,800. I paid $2,800 4 weeks ago. That's retail, she said, shrugging. You walk out the door, you lose 30%. You want the cash or not? I took the cash. I felt the burn of the $1,000 depreciation. That loss wasn't just market friction. It was the stupidity tax I was paying for trusting the wrong person. I took the $1,800 and immediately applied it to the Amex balance. It felt like bailing out the Titanic with a teaspoon, but it was progress. The final week brought acceptance, or at least resignation. The hostility broke, replaced by a desperate, frantic energy. She realized the clock was real. She had 3 days left. She cornered me in the hallway on a Tuesday morning. I can't find an apartment, she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. The market is crazy. Everything requires first, last, and a security deposit. I don't have the liquidity. That is a procurement problem, I said. You had liquidity. You converted it into handbags. I sold the bags. You took the money. That money went to service the debt you incurred. It didn't belong to you. It belonged to American Express. Noah, please. Just let me stay another month. I'll sleep on the couch. I'll pay you rent when I get my next check. No extensions, I said. If you're still here on the 31st at 12 p.m., I call the sheriff's department to execute the eviction order. If you don't have an apartment, I suggest you look into short-term storage for your things and a hotel. Or perhaps one of the friends you treated to dinner can house you. They won't take me in, she admitted, looking down. That reveals the quality of your investments, I said. You invested in people who offer zero yield in a crisis. On the final day, the 30th day, I took the day off work. Not to help her, but to supervise the extraction. I couldn't risk her taking collateral out of spite My watches, my electronics, the copper out of the walls. The mover she hired, two guys in a beat-up van, arrived at 10 a.m. I stood by the door with a clipboard. I checked the walls for gouges as they moved the furniture. I watched every box leave the unit. At 11:45 a.m., the apartment was clear of her property. The space looked larger, colder, and infinitely cleaner. She stood in the entryway. She looked smaller than she had a month ago. The glamour was gone, stripped away by the logistical reality of her situation. She was holding the key fob. "I hope you're happy," she said. It wasn't screamed. It was just a statement. "You chose a bank account over a human being." "I chose integrity over deceit," I corrected. "You fired yourself, Rachel. I just processed the paperwork." "You're going to be alone," she said. "You think your money will keep you warm?" "It keeps the heat on," I said. "And it ensures I don't wake up to find my future has been leveraged by someone else's whims." Place the key on the counter. She hesitated. For a second, I thought she might throw it at me. But the fight was gone. She dropped the fob. It made a plastic clatter on the granite. "Goodbye, Noah." "Goodbye." She walked out. I waited until I heard the elevator ding and the door slide shut. I didn't sit down immediately. I went to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then I went to the kitchen drawer, took out the fresh cylinder and tools I'd bought at Home Depot, and replaced the lock entirely. It took me 20 minutes. Security is not a state. It is a process. I walked through the apartment. I checked the bathroom. She had left a half-used bottle of shampoo. I threw in the trash. I checked the closet. Empty. I sat down in the living room. It was quiet. The specific grating frequency of her presence, the underlying chaos she brought into the system, was gone. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the master spreadsheet. Total theft and loss stood at $23,000. I had recovered $4,200 via cash transfer and another $5,800 via resale of goods. The remaining debt was $13,000. I looked at that number. $13,000. It stings. It's a failed trade. It's a bad quarter. But in the grand scheme of a lifetime, it is a cheap lesson. If I had married her, if I had let this go on for 5 years, the number would have been a zero added to the end. She would have compromised the mortgage, the 401k, the legal standing to claim half of the assets I had built. She would have been a hole in the bottom of the boat that no amount of bailing could fix. 13 grand was a bargain. It was an exit fee. I closed the laptop. I walked to the kitchen and brewed a coffee using the espresso machine, the one she tried to take, which I had successfully retained. I drank it standing up, looking out the window at the city skyline. The traffic below was chaotic, a mess of merging lanes and braking lights. But up here, the air was still. I didn't feel lonely. I didn't feel sad. I felt the specific, clean satisfaction of a balanced equation. The liability was off the books. The hull was patched. The course was corrected. I was back to zero, but zero is a stable foundation. Negative is not. I washed the cup, dried it, and put it away. Then I went back to work. Thank you for listening. That brings today's story to a close. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. See you next time.